I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
He struggles with being honest. You know, it's just sort of like always, I feel like always kind of looking for openings and opportunities. And I just don't really know that he's telling me the truth. So that's what I really want to feel, is like a sense of ease. There's not a lot of ease in this moment.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing here at Together, please don't be shy about leaving a review for us on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. And please consider donating to our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. For a donation of as little as $2, you'll get access to exclusive clips and content from our shows. We're just getting off the ground, so every penny really helps. Thank you. Now on to the show. Today's episode is part 2 of an interview about the struggles inherent to communication and which are made more challenging by non-monogamy. If you haven't heard Tuesday's episode, you should probably go back and listen to that because it'll give you some more context for what's going on today. Now in today's episode, our couple, Esther and Chris, are going to share with us the details of a challenge that they're currently facing and that remains unresolved for them. It takes a lot of courage for these two to be as open as they have been with us. So thank you very much, Esther and Chris. And with that, let's go to part 2 of our interview with Esther and Chris. Do you trust each other?
Not right now, really.
What does that mean? What is trust?
I think for me, trust is about consistently seeing somebody being there, like being present in the moments that matter. Somebody who you can really rely on, somebody who you believe has your best interest at heart, that it's not just about them, but it's actually also about you. That to me is like the foundation of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that resonates for me. I think there's, consistency is important, reliability is important, the ability to aspire and then more often than not, tell the truth, tell your truth, kind of where you're at with that truth, so that the other person can kind of act in accordance with the way that you see things, I guess.
Yeah. And why do you say that you don't trust each other right now?
Well, I think given Esther's definition, there's been times when I've optimized for my own experience, when I've done things to privilege myself and what I want. My impatience certainly rubs her the wrong way. And, like my like hunger and desire for things sometimes is just so strong and it becomes unbearable and it kind of like just overwhelms my thoughts. And so that's not necessarily a very safe person to kind of rely on. I'm going to like pursue the things that like I want to pursue, and then it feels like it's at her expense, or it makes her like go crazy because it's like she can't, trust that I'm going to like stick around or whatever.
Are you talking about sexuality exclusively?
No,
here?
not necessarily. Not personally. I mean, that may be a component of it, but that I wouldn't say that that's the number one thing on my list of, things that like I oftentimes seek out,
It sounds like you're placing the blame for the lack of trust on yourself.
Well, I am certainly responsible for, a good deal of the static in our relationship right now, but I also think that there's been ways in which I have triggered Esther, and her reaction, let's say, has been like a 5 or a 10x multiple of what it may have otherwise been, had she if these triggers were able to be kind of like understood and like put in their place in a sense. Like she and I are both in some ways out of control of our own selves, right? Like when she triggers me in ways, I go into this deep cavernous pit of like, of safety and security because I don't want to feel anything and I don't want to be touched and I, just leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
And she, on the inverse side, is banging at my door to sort of get some kind of emotional love and attention and reassurance that I'm not leaving, that I'm sticking around, and that has nothing to do with me either. And so those things make both of us feel crazy and unsafe, and it brings up all this old stuff that like we have to somehow kind of exercise out of our bones again. And that makes it very hard to trust the other person because we don't have those things in check.
Yeah. Is that the same for you, Esther?
I mean, yeah, he has broken boundaries in our relationship, and that has made me very wary of his ability to be honest with me. And so when he's broken those boundaries, instead of me just being like, okay, I see this as part of a bigger, challenge that you're working through, or I see that you did this for XYZ reason, or you didn't think it was a very big deal or whatever, right? Like I could have approached it from a place of a kinder place. And instead I was like, fuck you. Like, fuck that.
When he crossed the boundaries?
Yeah. So my response being abrasive and harsh and, really like holding his feet to the fire and burning him has made him. Yeah, I'm like I don't hold back. So as a result of that, he's afraid of me in those moments, and so that leads him to not trust me because my response is very overpowering.
Right. So it's a two. So okay. Now you have this. I've been trying to figure out how to articulate the expression that you have on your face when you look at Chris. It's there's a bemused quality to it, and there's an affection. There's a love and affection that's there, but a distance, and it makes me wonder, what do you want?
Well, I want to feel safe in our relationship. I want to feel that I can really lean into him, and that isn't going to end up like biting me in the ass.
Yeah.
That all the things that I've gone through and all the sacrifices that I've made for this relationship to come to fruition, that it wouldn't just crash and burn over something that I think is so stupid, which is, like very short-term ego boosts.
Sex.
It's not always sex. It's not always sex, but he struggles with being honest about other women. It's just sort of like I feel like always kind of looking for openings and opportunities, and I just don't really know that he's telling me the truth. So that's what I really want to feel, is like a sense of ease. There's not a lot of ease in this moment, and I want to feel ease again.
Yeah, you want to be able to rely that you can lean in and that foundation will be there so that you can give the relationship everything that you have.
Yeah, and I feel like I am giving it everything I have. So that's where the distant look comes from.
Yeah, and what I'm curious about then is the honesty piece. One of the hallmarks, we've had so many couples in this studio who've shared with us that they have different brands of open relationships, and the element of it that seems to be the common thread amongst all of them, they're all different, is this absolute complete communication around the dynamic, whether it be from anything from flirting all the way up to sexual contact and everything in between. And that requires trust, that kind of communication. It requires a trust on the part of the person who's going to deliver the communication that they're not going to be burnt to a crisp. And the fear that they're going to be burnt to a crisp probably comes from a legacy issue. And then it requires trust on the part of the person receiving the communication, that the communication is thorough, that there wasn't anything left out. And I'm wondering what in that structure is missing for you right now, Esther.
A lack of thoroughness and a changing of what is his truth. Like, he'll say, this is how I feel, this is what I want, this is what I'm going after, and then he goes further.
But his truth might change.
But the communication wasn't there to articulate that ahead of time.
Okay. So, Chris, is that a fair characterization of what goes on?
I mean, I think it's a fair characterization of her experience, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that there's more context on my side. I think that, like, it's interesting. I would say that we are, the ability to either like trust and for there to be thorough communication is actually not so far relative to, other relationships that may struggle to have any kind of communication or any type of like directness. Like, we actually have a lot of it. And I would say that in the beginning of our relationship, we had an extreme amount of trust and an extreme amount of communication. Like, everything was open, everything was sort of acceptable. It was, the experience was very unconditional. And it was sort of something that we like talked about as being like, oh my God, like this is an unconditionally like, loving relationship where I can tell you all the things, all the crazy shit, all the stuff that I wouldn't tell anybody else, that I was inhibiting and holding back from the world, and that I was frankly scared of. And you just receive it. You just accept it. And it was like this amazing kind of like melting process for us. And then there were these moments. And
it must have been revelatory and cathartic for you to be able to be that
sure.
direct and honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, if you put that into the context of my sort of entire life and the times when I grew up and tried to be honest and try to be direct and try to sort of like be, to express myself in those ways. And then the times where I was betrayed for being honest, or distrusted for being honest, or distrusted for the content of the things that I shared, I learned to be very distrustful of sharing, of being honest, of being transparent, because it never worked out for me.
In the past.
And
then this was the first time.
And so this is the first time, after like 30 years where it's like, oh my God, I can just like let it all out. And she has space for this and capacity. And this is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And the experience was reciprocal.
Yeah.
And then I had one of these moments, where I went out in the world and there was an opportunity, and I'd previously expressed, okay, well, this is kind of what I want. And I will acknowledge that like my communication was not thorough because I also tend to be a people pleaser. So I was trying to sort of shape the communication to sort of be minimally harmful and not expansively like possible of like, but with her. Right. So I'll be more precise. So before I went on a trip, I was like, hey, I'd like to go and maybe I'll make out with some people. Then I go on the trip and then like a lot more stuff happens.
Yeah.
And she's like, what the fuck? Like, you left, you said you're going to do this, but then all this other stuff happened. This is not cool. This is not acceptable. You violated my trust. And then from that moment forward, and like we've sort of pinpointed that as like this break in the dynamic, I think we both reverted back to like our prehistoric, like, child minds in the way that we react to each other when these things happen. It's like, you're going to do the exact same thing that everyone that's ever disappointed me has done in my life. Yeah. And she's saying that back to me.
Right.
And then we're like, having World War III every time.
The echo chamber.
Yeah. And it just like goes back and back. So it's amazing because I know that we have that capacity and we have that potential.
Yeah.
And from that break, there's just reverberations.
Well, let's go back to that break, because there's another one of the rules that I hear all the time is that there's a rule built in around that possible scenario, because that happens fairly frequently.
As in like the trip scenario?
The whatever. You go into a situation thinking that there's going to be cuddling, and it turns into sex.
Sure.
Or whatever. And And that, or you go to a bar thinking you're meeting up with some friends and there's a girl there and you want to kiss her.
Sure.
Like any scenario where you think there's going to be one thing and there's something that's at a higher.
There's a deviation.
Right. And so usually people have a rule around what's supposed to happen when that begins to manifest. Do you guys have a rule?
I mean, so actually it was kind of unlucky, whatever, that I called him and we were having a conversation in the middle of it happening. So like some things had already happened. I gave him a call to check in on him. He tells me what goes down and I was like very hurt because it was, far above and beyond what our boundaries had included.
Yeah.
So I asked him in that moment to please stop. I was like, I hear what you've done. I hear what you're saying. The thing that would make me feel safe again is if you discontinue what's happening. And at that point, she was like laying in bed. And so I was like, instead of her staying the night in your hotel room, it's no big deal. She lives in the same city. She can just take an Uber home and you already had your fun. So like, could you just stop and call it a night? And he said no. And the follow-up was that he had then said, I will stop talking to her. And then I find out a few days later, nope, he didn't. And then a few months go by and I find out he's secretly texting her again. So it's these like repeated stabs for me into like my heart that makes it difficult. And so in that moment, you ask like what happens in that moment. For me, that was an opportunity. There was actually an opportunity for him to make a course correction, if you will.
Yeah.
But he has to choose to do that.
And you're still open.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what's I've always wanted to ask somebody about that moment.
Which one?
The moment where she said, send her home. And you said no.
That isn't actually, I mean, it was more like it was 3 a.m. or whatever it was my time. And it's true. She had like fallen asleep in my hotel room, and being the people pleaser that I am, like I was like, oh my God, like that sounds like such a terrible thing to wake this person up and send her home. And so while in the sort of posthumous, like,
yeah, but you woke up the next morning a few hours later and did it again. So it wasn't just like,
well, to your question about that moment, it was like, I hear what she's asking for, but that sounds like a really terrible thing to do to a person. I don't really want to do that.
Well, because then you were faced with who do you please?
Correct.
And why did you choose what you did?
Well, like I said, I'm a people pleaser. So, I mean, but she was there, and facing a person in that moment was whatever, seemed harder to me.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, and this is very naive in, again, given the aftermath, I was very naive to think that we could kind of work through it. I was like, well, this is a misunderstanding or like a miscommunication. When I had, when I had texted Esther the night before and I was like, hey, there's like this cute girl here who seems interested in me. I think we might make out or something. She was like, that's fine. I trust you. Do whatever you want. Like that was the message that I got in the text. And when I heard do whatever you want, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like she trusts me to do whatever I want.
Trust you to stay within our boundaries, which we had.
These are two different communications.
Oh, okay. But there were boundaries.
Yeah,
set
very
before.
clear boundaries
Did
before
I ask
the
that
trip.
question? I think I missed that.
So what I'm saying is, yes, we had set boundaries beforehand.
Oh, but then she said do whatever,
Correct.
and you thought that meant break the boundaries.
And that's when I thought, oh, this is a relaxing of the boundaries.
And then you were in the situation and didn't want to be rude to this woman.
Yes.
And to you, Esther, that was not the communication. He broke the boundary. You did not give him permission to do that. And then he compounded it by refusing to meet your requirement and then making love to her again the next morning.
Yep.
Or having sex with her. So can I ask about that next morning?
If you'd like.
Did you feel guilty about that when it happened? Did you think, wow, I'm compounding this?
I was not prepared for the consequences that transpired after that.
Yeah.
Again, I guess I had this naive conception of what an open relationship could be like and what that would look like with Esther, because she had, herself been in these types of situations before. And yes, I definitely went beyond the boundaries that we had set before I went on the trip. I thought that I'd received a communication that was like, you can do what you want. Like, I actually feel comfortable and safe. And I took that and I worked with that. And then she did make this request. And then, I felt like I couldn't be rude and kick this person out. And then it was like, well, I'm not going beyond what I've already done. Like, what difference does it make if I do it again?
Okay. So, all right. So now what I'm curious about is...
Which, by the way, it was a complete asshole thing to do. So okay, I will accept that. Like, it's not like I'm completely an idiot. But.
I mean, okay. But also, I think what's interesting is that he had made requests to me in the previous year. At that point, we'd been together a while. And he had asked me at different points, hey, I'm not comfortable with the guy that you're having this communication with, or whatever. Can you please not pursue this? And every time that he made that request, I honored it. So it was really challenging to not have that reciprocated.
Well, that's my next question. Chris, it seems to me like you can acknowledge that you hurt her.
Oh, for sure.
Whether you were justified or whether the communication was flawed, or
I mean, there was pain that was caused, for sure.
And that your actions were the source of that.
Yes.
And then now moving forward, you have an ongoing relationship with this woman, it sounds like.
I mean, I wouldn't really characterize it as such, but I mean, that is what I think Esther's experience was.
Yeah. Are you, what is it? So then what do you have?
I think part of what I've gotten better at is being more honest with what something actually is. I think that I've historically been either a little naive or just kind of unwilling to call things what they are, because I won't call them the thing that they are until I get sort of verbal confirmation from the other person that it is what it is. And like, it's actually really not sexy to talk to someone about what this thing is. It's like, what are we doing right now? Like, is this or is it that? And they're like, I don't know. Like, we're just making out. And then you're like, but I need to know. And anyway, so in this particular case, we continued a conversation because I had a hard time saying, look, I can't talk to you anymore. Like, what we did or what I chose to do really hurt my partner, really affected our relationship, and therefore I can't talk to you anymore. It was really hard for me to like just go in and like burn that bridge. It just felt I'm not good at doing that. And I didn't know her. Well, maybe I did or no, like know her really. Anyways, it was a request that Esther made that I didn't really feel like I could honor. And I didn't say that either. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Instead, it was like, okay, I'll just sort of not really do it. And then it kind of continued, and it wasn't like I was like excitedly doing this thing, or at least that's not the way that I experienced it. But yeah, I mean, it was quasi dishonest for sure.
Esther, you just shook your head.
I mean, it's just quasi dishonest. You struggle just to own it. It's like you're still struggling to own it all these months later.
Okay. I mean, so it was dishonest.
Yeah. I lied to you, Esther. I treated you like an asshole. I was an asshole to you. I didn't live up to our agreements. Yeah. I mean, these are things that are true, but you struggle to say them.
Oh, maybe that's true.
Well, I mean, there are facts, right, that
Yeah.
you can own, but the asshole part's a characterization.
Sure. I will own that that's the characterization I give to that behavior.
So I'll put it this way. Like, I mean, obviously there was a grave miscommunication.
Yeah.
And the sort of maybe earlier noob thing to do is to like change things in flight, where we had set boundaries, and then I'm on a trip, and of course you do the thing when you're on the trip that you're not supposed to do, which is to change the boundaries, or for me to interpret that the boundaries had changed, and then that kind of like created this whole spiraling thing. And I mean, this is such a rising action in the overall disturbance in the force, so to speak, of our relationship, that I think that's why we're sort of like, continuing to like just like talk about it.
Well, okay, but let's really get real.
Yeah.
This just happened again a month ago. Same thing.
Same woman?
No, different woman, goes on a trip, does things, comes back with a different set of, he crosses a boundary. He comes back and it's still ongoing. So that's why this feels fresh, even though what we initially were talking about was from months ago. Like, to say that the lesson has been learned and we made it through, like, it just happened again.
Yeah. And so you need two things, it sounds like, to move forward. One is for Chris to acknowledge unequivocally. Is that how you say that word?
Unequivocally.
Unequivocally?
But you can put a B in there.
You need Chris to acknowledge the facts of what he did without quibbling about them. And he is acknowledging how it makes you feel, but he's not, he's squirrely around the facts. And then you need to have him commit in a real way to a particular set of rules. I'm not sure I know what those rules are. Do you?
I mean, sometimes I think I do, but in this moment, I don't know.
Is that because you feel like you need to take some cooling off time before doing anything?
It's because I have my own walls have started to go up.
Yeah. Because of trust.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to take them down in the right circumstances?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you're still here.
Yes, I'm still very here.
I mean, what strikes me is you're hurt. You are hurt and you're annoyed, and I don't think you fully have gotten clear with one another how much you're hurt. But you're still fully in this. You haven't left him. And you haven't left her. A famous therapist once told me that all of these disputes can be boiled down to the question being asked over and over, do you love me unconditionally? And I keep seeing that reflected in Chris's actions. Tell me if this is a reach, Chris. But the theory that I keep applying as you're talking is the notion that what was so profound and cathartic at the beginning of the relationship was that Esther was willing to love you unconditionally, and unconditional with regards to any sexual appetite you might have. And that's what you want. And because that's what you want, whatever rule gets set, you're going to push it because you want to see if she'll still love you unconditionally.
That's heavy.
Is there any truth to it?
I mean, I haven't thought about it in that way. And I don't know that that's exactly it. I guess, to sort of speak to maybe what you were sort of overall saying is like, I know that we both have this capacity to sort of be there and to like see each other like as we are and like what we want, and to be trustworthy again. I think that, ever since there was this break with either maybe like the picture that each of us like had of the other as being that unconditionally loving person, and then for us to make decisions or to react to each other in ways that were familiar and again echoes of the past. I mean, so the other part of this, is that yes, like I absolutely hurt Esther when I decided to, not kick this person out of my hotel room and then to do things again. I get that, and I do own that I did that. And then like the things afterwards with like, the messages and stuff like that, like, yes, that happened too. And no, I was not as honest as I should have been or could have been in the beginning or whatever. And I was afraid of the reaction and afraid of the response because the hailstorm that happened like immediately the next day was so... I don't even know how to like put it into words, but it sort of was like my own personal like Vietnam for like 2 days of just being like napalmed like over and over again. We were on the phone for hours, and
it was the absolute opposite of what
the reaction that I was hoping for
and what you'd experienced at the beginning.
Correct. and it was a direct reaction to my behavior and my choice and my decision and the things that like I chose that I wanted for myself.
Yeah.
And then how could I tell her again how I felt or what had actually happened, or the fact that, this person was continuing to send me messages. Like I like to open it up and to share that and to, and she asked me to look at my phone to see if we'd been messaging. I let her look at my phone, but I knew that the reaction was going to be annihilation.
Yeah.
And so how do you sort of openly invite annihilation when you're in those moments? And I've gotten better at it. I've gotten better at I have. Screw you, I have. But it's a work in progress. I feel the pain and I feel the resistance like inside of me to like not want to invite what I know is coming. And I have gotten better. I'm not perfect. Like I am a very flawed, like problematic person that's complex in certain ways. And I struggle within myself to kind of overcome my own self.
Yeah.
And so, do I wish that like I had greater capacity to be sort of open and transparency and just bear the brunt of my decisions, or to make perfect decisions up front and not want the things that I want as deeply as I want them? Well, perhaps, but that isn't who I am. That isn't how I am. And so I sort of aspire or dream about a person that does exist, in the context of this relationship.
Okay, well, we have probably 45 seconds left, given your guys' timeline to get to your appointment, which you've told me is very important.
Apparently, we'll have to get some therapy for this conversation.
But what I want to know is part of what Esther's saying is, okay, I get all that, but I just need to know what the rules are, and then for you to apologize, and the apology is probably a process. But the rule thing, do you think you could set up a set of rules that you could?
What I would say is this recent instance that she's talking about, if I recall correctly, and I may not, because we tend to go through lots of conversations with lots of variations of the rules, but I feel like before I left for this trip, we're like, okay, the rules are you can kind of do whatever you want. And, we're breaking down all these rules because it hasn't worked in the past, and you want to go do whatever you want to do, so go do whatever you want to do. And then that's what I did. And however, the violation was not about what I had necessarily done with another person. It was about the way that I treated her and the way that I was unavailable and didn't make myself available while I was traveling. And so it was a different thing this time. Like it wasn't about me sort of violating that trust. It was about availability and taking responsibility for the things that I said I was going to do.
I would love to hear your response to that. So let's have it, but then let's acknowledge we are only at the tiniest bit into this conversation and we need to stop. So Esther, respond to that, and then let's just pick this up again later.
Yeah. So that's partially true. It wasn't actually him having like a sexual experience with another woman that bothered me this time. It was a series of decisions he made where I made requests of him where I said, hey, you know what, I really want and need to connect with you. And then him saying, no, I'm choosing to hang out with her more. So that was hurtful, but I could have gotten over that pretty quickly had he not broken the boundary of we're not having a relationship with anyone else. And he came home saying, now I'm in a relationship with this person. And so that is a very clear violation of our boundaries. And so that has actually been the bigger pain point for me.
Got it. Okay. Then this is where I want to end, since we're not even close to done with this conversation. Why are each of you sticking it out? Chris first.
I think one, there's just this potential. I still believe that it's there. I still believe Esther challenges me in like really important ways. I have a lot of broken shit inside of me that turns out, like you shake the sort of bag of glass and you're like, wow, there's like a lot of stuff that like needs to be worked on. And whether I like the process or not, whether it's like, pleasant or not, it's useful, it's valuable, it's sort of making me a more self-aware person, which hopefully will translate into like much better stuff later on. I feel like I'm at the beginning of this journey that I've been on for like 3 years, and how else am I going to get there unless there is a person that's sort of like pushing me in all these things and pushing all my fucking like buttons, on my own, it's not going to happen.
And you want it to be her.
Yeah. And I think she's, as much as like we drive each other crazy, like we still come back, and there's still things that are really good about her approach and like her ability to like get over things and then come back and like, so there's compliments there that are really sticky and that are actually really good.
Got it. Why are you sticking it out?
I feel a lot of loyalty to Chris. I love him really deeply. He's someone who I can see living a long life with. And I don't think that's going to always be easy. And I feel like we're in a really hard moment. But I'm not somebody who just gives up easily. And yeah, the potential piece like is definitely something I hold on to as well. Like I see that. And so I feel like if we can find a way to communicate consistently and really learn how to trust each other again, that we can have a really amazing, beautiful relationship. And yeah, that feels like worth fighting for.
Well, that's it for part 2 of the Esther and Chris story, folks. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to our show on iTunes and leave us a review. It makes a big difference when you do those two things. And you can find our crowdfunding campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. For as little as a $2 donation, you can get access to exclusive clips and content from some of our shows. Every penny really makes a difference for us at this early stage, so thank you. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at @together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. And I absolutely love to hear from listeners, so please don't be shy about it. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and my one and only is Aubrey Pick. I love you, honey. I'm sorry I can be such a jerk sometimes. Thanks once again to our guests, Esther and Chris. Guys, I really love this show, and I hope you can come back for another one. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.